100 systems. From the greatest doubters to the most loyal white knights of Star Citizen, there is one area where they are likely to agree, and this is the possibility of Star Citizen having 100 systems on release. This topic comes up often enough that it's worth exploring in a little more detail. Depending on who's bringing it up, it's either the prime example of the ambition or the prime example of the hubris that this project represents. So where did this number come from, and is it even possible? Let's take a shallow dive into this topic. In the winter of 2012, rumors that Chris Roberts, the creator of the extremely popular, groundbreaking, and genre-defining Wing Commander series, was returning to his roots, creating a new single-player project called Squadron 42. Unlike his previous ventures, done through the studios of Electronic Arts, Origin, Microsoft, and others, this project would be crowdfunded through a Kickstarter campaign, allowing Chris to create the game he had always wanted to, free from the constraints of a publishing company. By mid-November, it was obvious that Gen Xers, among others, were throwing their full financial weight behind the Kickstarter, and it was already starting to hit record levels. Every day, a new seemingly impossible goal was set and then smashed through. While the funding has now famously hit $500 million, not everyone remembers those relatively humble beginnings, where the backers decided to fund a project that was becoming much more ambitious than the originally planned, seemingly by the hour. It became clear, after a bit, that the creators of the Kickstarter were a bit overwhelmed with the success of their fundraiser, and no matter how goofy or seemingly unattainable a goal appeared, the funding kept coming in, rolling in and then rolling past. On November 16, 2012, the promise of the systems was made, with one system of the 10 being unlocked for every $100,000 pledged. The goal was easily met. Notably, none of these systems were the Stanton system, currently the only system in the verse. The following day, November 17th, along with the playable ship class the Cruiser, which would later become the Idris, the bar was raised to the 60 star systems. On November 18th, 70 systems. And on November 19th, along with the goal of the orchestral score and playable Bengal carrier, the stretch goal dropped that Star Citizen will launch with 100 star systems. It should be noted that Star Citizen back then was a simpler project. Planet Tech, while not seen as impossible, indeed other independent projects, such as Infinity Quest for Earth, shown here, had proven this tech was possible and viable as early as 2004. Planet Tech was still seen as a long ways off, however. In the meantime, Star Citizen, as well as Squadron 42, were going to lean heavily on cutscenes in much the same way the Wing Commander games had. When one wanted to land on a planet or moon, there would be a cutscene of your ship flying to the planet, landing, and then you would be at the landing zone. In this scenario, 100 systems was simply a matter of designing 100 or so landing zones, with possibly several of them being similar enough to cut down on dev time. However, what is seen as a turning point in the scale of the project came in 2015, when, with the release of From Pupil to Planet, shown here, CIG let it be known that they had cracked Planet Tech and would be implementing it in-game as early as 3.0. This came after asking the community if we would like this larger scope, which, after funding the Kickstarter to the tune of $65 million, it wasn't surprising that the community said yes. It's not clear that anyone, including CIG, realized what that would actually entail. Nearly 8 years on from Pupil to Planet, CIG is now closing in on completing Tier 0 of the Stanton system, which is now lacking only the Aaron Halo and the jump points to the other systems in order to be complete. 8 years to mostly complete a single, albeit complicated and densely populated system. Pyro, which is likely to be the second system introduced into the verse, has been undergoing development for at least 2 years, and will likely hit 3 before it's released in what would roughly be Tier 1 or Tier 2 state, places to land, things to do. There's a possibility Nyx, a third system, is being worked on the sly, but this has not been confirmed. We do know that Delamar, and along with it the landing zone of Levski, are being worked on currently. Indeed, Delamar and Levski were in current versions of the persistent universe. At best, that's 3 systems in roughly 10 years. Even by that generous, optimistic math, it would take CIG over 100 years to create and release 100 systems. The first question is this: is CIG legally obligated to meet this stretch goal in their Kickstarter? Unfortunately for CIG, the answer, thanks to Kickstarter Incorporated versus Fan-Funded LLC, is yes. The case law established that stretch goals are considered a contract, and thus not meeting a stretch goal is considered a breach of contract. Thus, CIG cannot release Star Citizen until all of the stretch goals are met. And that includes the stretch goal of 100 systems. Incidentally, when asked, this is also why I say that pets have to be in the game. They legally have to be, as they were the $64 million stretch goal on November 26 of 2014. So is it going to take around 300 years for CIG to roll out 100 systems as promised in the Kickstarter? No. Once jump points are finalized, CIG could easily hook up 100 empty systems by jump points. If they were feeling particularly generous, they could even throw in a Starfield skybox. Kickstarter stretch goal would be fulfilled. Obviously, though, this isn't what people are actually asking. No, thanks to the initial design and lore of the systems, making a system that's like Stanton was, a tier 0, just empty plants and moons with just a couple locations on each, would be simple. With basic moon and planet textures along with simple spheres, CIG could bang out the 100 systems in a week. Again, however, this isn't what people are actually asking. No, but okay, so let's go to the star map. Look at the systems. Stanton is unusual in the number of planets, moons, and habitable stations it has. It's a complex system, and that's one of the reasons why it was selected as the first system CIG should tackle. Most of the systems in the verse are not this complex. CIG can always adjust the lore to make systems more populated, the locations more complex, as they did with Pyro, retconning the uninhabitable planets into inhabited ones. So a focus here is the procedural tools, which CIG has been working on for the last 10 years. They've been building out Stanton, but more importantly, they've been building the tools that allow planets, moons, stations, outposts, and likely towns and other points of interest to be built procedurally, very quickly. Elite Dangerous used similar procedural tools to create 400 billion systems, while No Man's Sky famously, and some might say infamously, used procedural tech to develop over an octadectillion systems. That's a 1 followed by 19 zeros. Procedural systems to create planetary systems, even detailed ones, have been around for a while, and creating 100 systems in this manner wouldn't be overly difficult. Although, CIG can't just make a galaxy of random planets, as both of the previous projects did, both Elite Dangerous, No Man's Sky, and Eve. The lore on most of these systems is now set in stone. As opposed to 100 random system, CIG is locked into creating the systems that have been written down by the lore team, although they've shown they're not above retconning as they've done with Pyro. Time and time again, CIG has stated that their planets, their moons, their stations will be assisted by procedural tech, but will be handcrafted. But dev vids have shown that the tools that they're using are meant to make that handcrafting as efficient and expedient as possible. These procedural tools have been under development for the last 8 years at least, and have been the true backbone to the game, and what will allow CIG to build believable planets, moons, and stations with an artist's touch very quickly. What CIG has been doing is building asset packs. Daymar is not just a desert moon, it's a desert archetype. Microtech isn't just a snow-covered planet, it's an archetype for snow terrains. While specific planets may require specific assets, even new ones, new systems will be rolled out quicker and quicker now that these tools are finally being refined. These asset packs will be expanded and customized over time, but a system could conceivably be fleshed out very fast at something like a Tier 1 implementation, an original-looking system with relatively unique places fitting in with their lore. CIG has been building out content as well, with derelicts and wrecks that can be salvaged, a dynamic economy, procedural outposts, and procedural cities. Additionally, CIG has been building out tools like Quanta that will allow these systems to be populated by AI that will need less direction, creating encounters and missions on the fly, even without specific mission givers. Quanta will allow missions to be created in a system without a dev having to personally write out encounters or missions. The economy will similarly be largely self-sufficient. Yes, but CIG has a few options here. The first option, and the one that the community seems to think is the most likely, is that CIG just keeps the game in a beta state. Feature complete but still missing components, such as all 100 systems, for example. In this way, the game would never officially be released, but they would never be sued for breach of contract. A second option is that CIG rolls out 100 systems in a Tier 0 state. They could use their procedural tools, they could create 100 systems that are bare bones, collections of plants, moons, stations, asteroid belts, and little else. Quanta and the locations themselves would make them mildly interesting, but they'd be largely uniform until CIG could swing back and polish them by backfilling. This process would likely take years. A third option is the most likely, in my opinion, and the most obvious. They keep releasing systems at a slower pace, releasing them as mostly polished and individualized, much like Pyro will be when it drops. It'll have enough details and unique locations to explore and hold a person's interest before the next system drops. In the same vein, CIG can release systems in Tier 1 state, all the planets, moons, asteroids, and major lore-based points of interest, and a few that aren't. Then, at a later date, they can come back and backfill with more details, either by using additional teams or bulking up the teams they have to add polish and individuality. It's also likely that, as these tools are completed, CIG will need fewer devs working on the engine and the tools, and can start spinning up and expanding teams like the one in Montreal. This will allow for systems to be created faster, either creating a single system in less time and or working on multiple systems at the same time. While this process will still take years, it won't take hundreds of years. And as the tools are refined and teams are expanded, CIG will be able to pick up the pace. In this scenario, CIG might have a drought of a couple years and then drop a few systems at once. It's possible that CIG could drop Nyx and Pyro at the same time, for example, knocking our total systems up to 3. There are systems that are much simpler than Stanton, Pyro, and Nyx, and these can be created much quicker. There are also systems that will require quite a bit more time and effort, systems like Terra, Sol, and the system that contains Spider. These will come slower or might come out in a simpler form, with one location on the planet or major point of interest realized in form but maybe not in function. There are certain elements, like the floating islands of Tohil, the Synth World, Xi'an space and architecture, Banu space and architecture, Spider, like I mentioned before, that will no doubt take a long while to suss out. It may be released in a much later wave, but at this point CIG has made the snowball and started rolling it down the hill. Progress has been slow but should pick up speed. It may take 5 years or even 10, but it won't take hundreds. That's my 2 cents on it. Thanks for watching through. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and see me next time.